I posted my impressions of AC Shadows on YouTube just when the embargo lifted, like 38 minutes ago. And I encourage you to watch the video because then I'll get paid. But also, like, you know, from ad revenue. Somebody's gonna be like, oh, clip that. See, you got paid. No, I didn't get paid. Okay. If they paid me for this, they could have paid for a more positive impression. No, my impressions of AC Shadows are a lot of, as I say here, a lot of what they showed was really impressive graphically, the weather systems, some of the dynamic AI stuff. There's a lot here that's really freaking cool, but there were a few things that are just like, were not really shown in a lot of detail because of how they set up the preview, like side quests and open world exploration. We just couldn't do that because the world was not open to us. It was literally walled off with invisible walls, which again is kind of normal. Like at a preview, they're not going to show you everything that the game has. But this particular preview was just much more constrained than I personally would have liked. Especially, I mean, I think the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 preview honestly spoiled me, because in that preview, we straight up got to just play the game from the start and do whatever we wanted with pretty much no restrictions. It was really cool. With this, it was a very specific and particularly like intentionally cut sliver of the game. And so we were just, you know, not shown the side stuff, which was frustrating because I feel like that's where this game potentially could excel or kind of fall apart. But having said that, the other thing I'm not convinced at all with is Yasuke. Joel Raptor actually put it really, really well. He said it's a world built for Nawe and Yasuke's just in it. And I think that's accurate. Nawe is able to do these backflips. She's able to parkour with her grappling hook. She's able to do all these really cool things. And then Yasuke just kind of runs at walls. And it's a little jarring. And I honestly don't know why anybody would play with Yasuke if they have the option, which you do. You can choose to go with male or rather with Yasuke or with Nawe at pretty much any point. I understand the thought process. Like they said when they were exploring the setting, they loved the idea of being able to explore both the shinobi fantasy and then also the samurai fantasy at the same time. And so they were like, instead of making one character that just did it all, have a ninja samurai, which would just be like having a Superman character. They said, we're going to split it and we're going to have these two different characters that specialize in each one. And I get that. I understand that thought process, but I think the problem is that Assassin's Creed is so much about like traversal, the parkour, exploration, that in this case, one of the characters, Nawe, is infinitely better at that compared to Yasuke. So I just genuinely don't know why somebody would play through it with Yasuke, unless maybe they just really don't like stealth gameplay. And maybe that's the brilliance of this, is that it makes it so people who hate stealth games can still play it and have a good time. But for me, I just genuinely don't know why you would play Yasuke when Nawe controls better, has, in my opinion, cooler movesets, and is just more capable. That could change when we get the whole game and we find out more. But as of right now, I'm just like, I just don't know. I don't know, man. But other than those things, which to be clear, open world stuff and side content stuff could be amazing. We just didn't really get to see hardly any of it. So maybe it's amazing, maybe it's terrible, which is why we weren't shown it. We just don't know. Other than those two, Yasuke's the only thing where I was really like, I don't know if this makes sense, man. Everything else is intriguing. They've done a lot of stuff like revamping enemy AI. They have something like as simple as when there is a rainstorm, high-level enemies wearing nicer armor will go inside and they shove all the grunts that were inside, the low-level guys, they shove them all outside into the cold rain to take their spots while they stay inside where it's dry and warm. And so when there's a rainstorm, you literally see them behave differently based on the weather or the season. Like when it's a blizzard outside or when it's snowy in the winter season, you'll see the high-level enemies get to stay by the fire and they send the grunts out to do the patrols, but they also will change how quickly they do stuff. So like the grunts will walk over to their outposts, they'll look around, and then they move quickly between them instead of coming and standing for a while because they're cold and they want to get back to the fire. And even like the difference in seasons where the grass will grow at different rates. So in like the summer, the grass will be decently tall. So Nawe can like go prone, or Yasuke can go prone and lay in the grass kind of like in The Last of Us Part 2, and that can provide cover. Or in the summer, you know, you could go into a bush or hide in a tree and the leaves will cover you so you can't be seen. But in the winter / fall, when all the leaves fall, you can't hide in a bush anymore because the leaves are gone and they'll be able to see you. Duh. Which is a really cool thing. So based on which season and the weather and the time of day, how you approach situations and encounters and stealth sequences will be totally different, which is honestly like really, really cool. And I think that could be really, really fascinating. Even little things like icicles that hang from the sides of walls, you can either shoot it with an arrow or a throwing star, or even just walk on top of where it's hanging, and the icicle will fall, either creating noise, or you can even impale people with those icicles if you drop it on their head. There's a lot of just really cool dynamics at play. At the same time, there's a lot of stuff they removed, like a lot of stuff that they removed, way more than I thought. Things like that are minimal and probably don't have that big of an effect, like no hunting animals anymore. They just don't let you kill animals. Fair enough. It's a cultural thing. They want to be sensitive. Don't just massacre hundreds of wolves and stuff and foxes. I get it. Not a big deal. The removal of like mini games. There's no Orlog. There's no Gwent like game as far as the people, the directors were telling us. There's no mini games. Okay. Not that big of a deal. But they did remove the eagle. There's no flying over and scanning outposts anymore. Now you have to look and visually identify your targets. They'll tell you something like, look for the building with the red roof on the west side of the city. And there's an older lady that is stirring a pot. She cooks dinner every night. And so look for that building. That's how you find your targets. I like that. That's a cool change. But other things like how in, like torches, there's no torches anymore. You can't pull out a torch. That was something that was really small, really minimal in Origins, just for lighting your way, or Odyssey. Those are gone. And part of it is because in Valhalla, they built it out so you could throw torches to burn buildings down as part of the raids, right? Now that's just removed. And the reason they said was because all the buildings are made of like paper and light woods. So if they gave you the ability to burn down buildings, you would just show up at a castle and burn every castle down. And I was like, honestly, fair enough. I was like, you know what? Yeah, if I had the option to just burn down every castle, I could see that being a problem. So they removed that because they just thought that wouldn't make sense. If they gave you the ability to burn down some buildings, why would it just arbitrarily not work at castles? Okay, I get it. Or one of the other things, like Origins and Odyssey had this cool mechanic where if an enemy died and in like a fort, other enemies and NPCs would come find the body, they'd pick it up, and then they would move it outside the castle walls and create a like pile for a mass grave later. That's completely gone. There's no systems like that in Shadows. And I asked them, why did you cut that out? That's cool. And they said, well, because culturally, the idea of taking like your soldiers and then throwing them in a mass grave would be like unbelievably insensitive and insulting. So they said, we cut that too. And I was like, okay, honestly, fair point. Fair point. And there's a lot of little stuff like that they cut and changed because they felt that it was inappropriate for the setting. One of the other things that they changed and that they cut, there is no ability to toggle day to night or night to day, which was a big thing in Origins, where you would have a quest that says, follow this guy. He leaves work at sundown, follow him home. And they removed that. So you can't cycle from day to night or night to day. Why would you do that? You know, because all these things that they're removing, there has to be a reason. And typically when we see this stuff, we just see that it's removed and then we have to guess. But I actually got to ask the creative director. I got to ask the game director, the gameplay director, the narrative associate director. I got to ask these people why. And they said it was because Shadows is built on the premise of players dealing with situations, ideal or not. Those extenuating circumstances like the weather. So they want you to be able to have a quest pop where it says break into this castle and assassinate this guy. And if it's 10 a.m. and it's thunderstorming, you can take on that quest as is and deal with the circumstances as they are. With the thunderstorm, it's loud. The rain makes it so that the enemies don't want to stand outside. So the high level enemies all kind of congregate inside. It also means that there's so much noise, they can't hear you as well, making stealth a little bit easier. There's all sorts of things like that. Their view distance is shortened, things like that. So they want you to have the option of just dealing with it there. But if you want to wait for a more ideal time or place, or conditions rather, you can do that. So if you're like, hey, I got to take on this assassination mission in this castle, but right now it's noon and a clear day, I'm going to wait till it's night. They're like, you can do that. Just go do a side quest. Go do something else for 5-10 minutes. And then come back and take on the mission when you decide the conditions are ideal. Because they said one of the problems they identified with Valhalla and Odyssey was that players were spending a lot of time in menus trying to manipulate situations until they were more ideal or until they liked it better. So they wanted to avoid that. And they wanted to make it so players would deal with situations as they presented themselves dynamically through the game. And honestly, fair point. I can appreciate that. Like with all these changes, all these shifts, there's a reason behind them. Do they work? Do they contribute to a game that is more fun, more immersive, and better? It's honestly too early to tell. Like we really can't tell, because it's with things like this, with these changes being made, it's about the overall package. It's about how it all ties together. That's the crucial bit. I am keeping an eye on the time, everybody, just so you know, for the Xbox Showcase. Don't you worry. So it's interesting, intentional changes. And some of them I love, like the removal of the bird and making it so you actually have to find objectives. I like that. Other changes, like in my view, removing some of the really cool dynamics of AI for, to be fair, for cultural reasons. I'm just not sure if I like that. I'm like, okay, you removed some cool bits and then you replaced them with other things. Where like, I'm just not sure if I buy that. With all this, I think there's a lot of interesting things that they've done. I am not sure how it all ties together. We didn't really get to see any side quest stuff. We didn't really get to see any open world adventuring stuff because it just straight up was not shown to us, because the slice was very narrow. And so I'm curious, but I did not leave the preview like I left the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 preview. I like the KCD 2 preview. I played 7 hours or whatever it was of the game, and I was like, I'm considering canceling my flight so I can play more. Like it was that immersive and exciting and intriguing. With this, I was like, I have a lot of questions still. I'm still not so sure about this. I'm intrigued, but I'm not like overflowing with excitement or anything. So time will tell. The other big thing is that tonally, this is a massive shift. I mean, this game was, from what we played, it was very dramatic and much more dry than like Valhalla or Odyssey. Valhalla and Odyssey are kind of silly, frankly. And so they're just goofy and silly and outrageous in a lot of ways. This was very, very just straight up dramatic, serious in tone. No real moments of like, that's cool. Nothing like that. It's all very serious. Dry as in Starfield writing? No, like the characters are grounded and what they're doing makes sense and the motivations are clear, and there's some, no spoilers, of course, but there were some plot twists and stuff we saw that were clever and interesting and made sense. So it's interesting writing. It's just not like in AC Odyssey, there's that quest line in the opening hours where you help that old lady go and collect herbs to make Viagra, basically, so that her lover can get it up because he's like 70 years old. And that's just like a little side quest you do. And it's goofy, it's ridiculous. And tonally, this game is opposite of that. Like, it's the total opposite. There's nothing like that. Arik Array points out something I actually bring up in the video, which is that, so no Marvel writing. This is the opposite of Marvel writing, where instead of the constant like quips, imagine if like Yasuke turns to the camera and they're like, we got to go assassinate this target. Yeah, eat the rich. Like, can you imagine? That's what I was braced for, but this is the opposite of that. to the point where maybe it's like too serious and it could get like really dry and exhausting by the end of it. But we'll see. We'll see. Time will tell. So overall, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. I was more impressed than I thought I would be. And I liked that they alluded a few times in indirect ways that they were specifically trying to do things differently than Valhalla, because they recognized some problems from Valhalla. But of course they can't just come out and say, you know, yeah, we agree Valhalla wasn't that great, or Valhalla had a ton of problems. Because it's like, it's not, they didn't make it. It was a different studio within Ubisoft and they did some help on it, but like, they can't just start bad mouthing it. But it was pretty clear that they made some active choices to address frustrations from Valhalla, which I can appreciate because I really didn't like Valhalla. So anyway, I encourage you to watch the whole video. It's like an hour plus long because I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I go through them all in a lot more detail there. We got to see the settlement system. We got to see the Animus hub. The Animus hub straight up is like the most unremarkable thing I've ever seen. It is basically just a new main menu for the game that lets you boot into other games that you own. And then they have some like free rewards for playing the game. Like I think previously it was much more monetized. I think at one point they had premium mini battle pass things, and I'm sure they had that stuff at one point, and I think they were bullied out of it. And that's why it's important to talk about that, to talk about the rumors and leaks, so that the producers and the people in the corporate offices in France, they see the reception to that and realize, hey, if we do this, we're gonna get destroyed. So I'm happy to report that the Animus hub is way less remarkable than any of us were braced for. It's basically just a reskin of the main menu, and that's about it. But on the whole, I mean, a lot of what they showed was really, really impressive, but there's other things that they're doing that I'm just not convinced of yet. And there's other pieces of the game that are pretty sizable that I feel like we just didn't get to see hardly at all, like the side quests and the exploration, which is what you're probably going to be spending most of your time doing in this game. So time will tell. If you want to see some actual like hands-on time, Jor is actually playing the game right now over on his stream. So, I mean, look at him. He's got 5,500 people watching. He's close to 1 million. He's very, very close. Just earlier when I popped this tab open, he was at like 250, like 96, 250 or something. So shout out to Jor. He's going to be talking with the game director or creative director, somebody within the dev team he's going to chat with soon. So maybe if that is interesting, we could look at a clip of that, but we shall see. He took my thing.